Has a story ever saved your life? How many times have you found comfort in the words of a melody, hope in the sound of music, or strength in the rhythm of dance? You've been hit so hard, you think you can never stand back up again. And then you remember, and your heart begins to flutter and race and sing its own song. A song whose notes are etched in your bones, as familiar as the skin on the back of your hands. And you drag yourself up again and you face the abyss with fearless eyes, remembering the song of a timeless heroine, a narrative you've cobbled together from a play, a film, a book, a legend, but now it's your story, your inspiration. Great art inspires, challenges, provokes, comforts. It can encourage battles, incite peace, immortalize what might seem mundane, divide communities, or unify people. Most of all, great art saves lives. My life was saved by art, by theater in particular. As a very young kid, I would perform for my mother and entertain her through her depressions. When things became violent, I would ask myself, what can I do differently next time? Reciting new recipes to help ease her mania, memorizing poems, reenacting books. I fell in love with theater at the age of 6. As a teenager, she kicked me out of the house, and that's about the time I did my first real play. I was homeless, sleeping in parks and walking up beachside to pretend to be a hotel guest to get the free buffet. Sometimes I shoplifted candy bars to survive. But 4 nights a week, I would come to the show I was cast in because I was given a manapua to eat in my scene. I was raised wild by a very brilliant yet mentally ill parent. With theater, I had to learn to show up no matter what, take notes for improvement. I had to learn when to solve problems for myself, when to ask for help, to adapt to different situations, directors. There's something life-changing about the discipline theater requires and the empathy it necessitates. Working on that play written by the amazing Carroll, my first real play, some wound started to slowly heal, but I was so far away from healthy still. I didn't have time or the means to think about theater for months after the show closed. I was occupied yet again with trying to survive. Then one day, a year later, I was looking around Ala Moana for a meal when my castmate from the Carroll play, Ron Carnation, a very respected actor here, ran into me. He told me I was good at theater and I should do more of it. I was shocked because I suspected everyone in the cast hated me. I didn't know what professionalism was. I would show up at 8 p.m. for the 8 p.m. show, and in theater, it's 2 hours early. The director had already stopped coming, of course, after opening, and cast members can never tell other cast members' notes. It's a very big no-no. Such a great guy like Ron saying this to me inspired me to study theater some more. So I signed up for college to study this, the most social of all art forms. I started community college because I didn't have a high school diploma, and community colleges accept everyone. I stole my mother's credit card to pay for the class. Training in a social art form imbues all participants with certain life skills. You need to think about others before yourself, how you serve the scene or the play. You need to communicate honestly, yet politely, solve problems creatively, believe in yourself, and yet be humble and magnanimous. In the beginning, I was so damaged I couldn't do anything. However, if a cast was depending on me, or if it was for the good of the show, I would do it, whatever was required. After time, the confidence theater gave me, the joy, the new perspectives, rehabilitated me. So after several years, I could do things for my own benefit, and the wounds began to scar over. Most of all, my mentor, Dr. Carroll, who founded Kumukuhua Theater and passed away recently, was instrumental in my character arc. He didn't just encourage me. He wasn't a pat ourselves on the back kind of guy. He held me to a high standard, explained what professionalism is, what good behavior is. He was relentless. I remember once I was screaming, as my poor mother used to do every day, in the hallway, and he came out of his office and he said, "No one acts like that in here! You never act like that in here!" And I never did that again. But there were still so many barriers. For example, once I had a friend who needed to drop a show. She wanted to be responsible and find a suitable substitute. I agreed to take the role for her. She told her director, "Tonight I'm bringing this incredible actor to replace me." Her director said thank you. I came with her to their rehearsal that night and got screamed at for 10 solid minutes in front of a cast of 27 because I was, quote, too Asian for the role, and how could my friend have possibly thought I was a suitable substitute? I remember she kept saying, "But she's good, just give her a try." He didn't. Suffice to say, I got sick of being too this or too that, or not enough one thing to be stereotyped effectively to be cast. So, on the advice of a friend, I began directing and pursuing an MFA in directing. I almost quit school, though. Again, Dr. Carroll stepped in to save the day. You see, I was taking an advanced directing course with another teacher who was renowned as being, how do I say this politely, predator. It wasn't so much his jokes to the male cast members about me. I was lucky, I was only harassed, he was already old by then. What made me almost quit was the fact that I had directed 20 shows at that time, and I was in a class with 4 white guys who had never once directed. And he would say things like, "Let's let the girl hold the door open for everyone. Let's let the girl talk last." I told Dr. Carroll, and he immediately did the paperwork so I could get credit for that class by directing off campus. And so, despite not having a high school diploma, I finished my MFA. My partner and I moved away, and I saw what real life could be beyond the streets, asylums, and abuse. I directed all over for so many communities. I got to learn so much. And sometimes, as my colleague Ku'ulani explained, distance can make you cherish something in new ways. After several years in New York City and London, we decided to return to Hawaii to make sure that young BIPOC actors wouldn't face as steep a climb as I did in this art form, and hopefully would have even more opportunities than I had growing up in a world where there were so few roles for us. Great art saves lives and can change the face of the world. But it can also uphold stereotypes, which is still happening now. I directed 8 shows this past year, and after 3 of them, watched as people would walk up to my white male partner and congratulate him on his directing work. To which he always replies, "Yeah, I had nothing to do with that, it was all Taurie." And then I would watch as the person would stare over at me mystified, unable to imagine that someone who looks like me could possibly direct. That's why it's important for our students to see me doing this work, and that they see others looking like them who do this work, so they know they have a place in this industry and this art form is for them. Here in Kaneohe, we started staging plays like Masi Kahahavai, Oriental Fada and Son, plays by local authors about people here. Most audiences I encountered thought theater was about singing and dancing. It's a big musical, it's a rehash of Broadway. And theater can be that, but when it's only that, a performance originating outside the context of your own life, with solely European faces rehashing the same tired boy meets girl story, it's underscoring that your story, the story of a queer girl in Kaneohe, or a grandma from Samoa raising her 2 grandkids alone, it's underscoring somehow that these stories aren't as important. Yet even when we offered these local stories and plays, there were profound barriers to people seeing the very kind of performance that might change their life or positively reinforce their own stories. For example, not having the time to take off from work to see a play, not being able to find sitters for young children, or the cost. That's why theater needs to be supported beyond box office sales, because these stories are integral to humanity and they make us better people. When they represent their community, they can inspire positive change. It's not just the time and money that bar people from seeing theater. These elements also prevent theater people from engaging with it. Like my Kumu said, anything worth learning is hard and takes time. Theatrical rehearsals are so time intensive, so many of the very artists who would benefit the most from participating in theater cannot afford to do so. Because like me, they are barely surviving. The people who love theater the most, who can't live without it, who are born to be on stage, who exist to create, profound artists are too often driven away from the very thing they love. Imagine a world where Vincent van Gogh's brother didn't support him through painting. Now imagine a world in which all people of color have the same economic help and can make the choice to pursue the thing they love. This is one of the many reasons my partner and I founded the first conservatory in Hawaii, so students wouldn't have to travel far away and go $80,000 into debts. So students who love performing can right here learn practical skills and perform in shows being held to the highest possible standard. And so performers can gain real professional experience and work in the field they love, telling stories about people who have too often been overlooked and ignored like them. This last Wednesday, we read our stories to each other, and the stories of my colleagues really inspired me and spoke to me. It's this ability to stand up again in the face of discrimination or abuse, to become an unstoppable force of nature, to be as hard and steadfast as the Kalo and Liko's story, or standing together as the Blackfeet rats in Keli'i's story. Our Windward students are heroes of mimesis, instruments of catharsis, transforming sorrow into poetry, standing on stage, diving into timeless characters with such extraordinary resilience and selfless strength. They are the people who rise above the tide of hardship, and that is the story I relate to and have seen in our students and have treasured here in Kaneohe for over a decade. And I hope and pray that because of these new stories we're telling on stage here at Paliku, like Ryan Okinaka's Aihula or Helela's Demigods Anonymous, stories about diverse heroines and heroes. And because of the preservation of our kapuna stories like Mohelani will speak about, I hope that because of these, the future won't hold so many dramatic obstacles for the new generations. Representation is the penicillin for discrimination. We must rehearse these new stories about triumph and inclusion until our performance becomes utterly authentic and we can all answer our true vocations, doing the thing we love the most, unhindered, for the greater good. Thank you.